And our topic for today is one that is very near and dear to me, unfortunately. Anxiety. That's a good one. That's why I got into meditation. It's actually why a lot of people get into meditation. I usually teach the anxiety in like 2 classes, but I'm going to try to do it in 1. I think I can do it. So if I'm like cruising and talking fast, maybe that's why. All right. The other thing I like to mention is you can ask me questions at any time. Like you don't have to wait for me to stop talking, or I don't know, or even if it's like not about what I'm talking about right now, just you can type your question into the chat at any time. Interrupt me. I welcome it. Gail, thanks for the vote of confidence. Okay, cool. So let's start by just kind of introducing meditation for those of us who are new, because a lot of us are new. This is our first time. So when we kind of think about meditation, the thing that comes to mind most frequently is relaxing, right? We want to be more relaxed, be less stressed, essentially, right? And meditation is really good for this, or it's amazing for it, in fact. But we can even go a little deeper than that and start to investigate, well, why? Why is it that meditation helps me feel relaxed? And kind of the resolution that we come to is meditation is really a learning tool. It's a way of familiarizing your mind with something, right? So if you think about something that you can do very easily. Let's say tie your shoe. I don't know. I don't think I've used that one before. All right. If I was like, hey, can you go tie your shoe? You'd be like, all right, I don't know why you're asking me that, but okay, I'm tying my shoe. And you wouldn't have to really put too much concentration or effort into it, right? Why? Tying your shoe is very familiar to you. You've been doing it a long time, I imagine, right? Even though I mostly wear sandals now. But because you've been tying your shoe for so long, tying your shoe comes very easy to you. And this concept, being familiar with something and having that as the result come easily to you, it's a main core principle of training your mind, right? And so this kind of works both ways, right? Good and bad. So if you think about something like anger, is it easy to get angry? You don't really have to try to get angry, right? You just get angry. You're having a great day. Somebody says something to you. Boom, angry. It doesn't take much effort, right? What about being really patient when things aren't going your way? I don't know about you, but for me, that takes a lot more effort than getting angry, right? Now, this doesn't mean that you're an inherently angry person. All it means is that your mind has had a great deal of practice getting angry. And so it's like, it's anger time. And it goes there really easily. It's very familiar with that emotion, right? Maybe it's had less practice being patient, right? And so meditation really is giving us the choice of what do we want to be more familiar with? Do we want to be more familiar with patience than anger? Do we want to be more familiar with peacefulness rather than anxiety? Do we want to be, familiar with being grateful for all the wonderful people around us and all the things they provide us, right? So all these great things that we aspire to do, we can do just by training our mind using familiarity, right? So you can think of meditation as literally equivalent to familiarization, right? So, I like to say that, sometimes we think meditation, it almost feels like, I guess it's like pulling peacefulness from somewhere. No, like that relaxation, that relaxed state, that's in you, right? It comes out sometimes, sometimes you're just super happy, super relaxed, right? It's in there, right? So meditation is teaching you to become familiar with it, more familiar with it. Why? So it comes more easily to you. Wouldn't it be cool if being relaxed came as easy as tying your shoe? That'd be great. I'd trade that in a second. Analogy I love to use for this. If you imagine you're at a still lake, right? Beautiful day, no wind, no rain. You can see the reflection in the lake, right? What about if it starts to rain? You can't see the reflection as well, right? If it's really raining, winds gusting, might not be able to describe the reflection at all, right? The reflection's there, it's just kind of inaccessible right now, right? And so this is a good analogy for your mind and pretty much how it operates. Your mind is naturally peaceful. Its default state, very calm, very reasonable, thinking cool and collective about things, right? All the stress, the anxiety, the bombardment of distractions and thoughts that are going kind of bouncing around in our mind all day long, pulling us. These are like raindrops, right? And they're just like the raindrops are obscuring the reflection on the lake. These kind of distracting thoughts that are obscuring our ability to access that peacefulness, right? So the first thing we want to do is clear away some of the raindrops. Just some, doesn't need to be all, because to use this to really beat this analogy to death, if you clear away, I don't know, 3% of the raindrops, right? You can see the reflection more clearly, right? So even if we clear away a small percentage of our distracting thoughts, we're going to relax a little bit, right? So this is the concept behind training, using meditation to relax a little bit, right? And then kind of the second half, which is what we'll do in our second half of today, is once our mind is more relaxed, well, then let's use that relaxed mind to do something, to investigate something, to become familiar with something we want to become familiar with, because we learn better when we're relaxed, right? When you're agitated, when your mind's super agitated, what happens, right? Things that normally don't bother you really bother you. Things that normally wouldn't worry you really worry you, right? So step one is just kind of getting back to a nice, fairly relaxed state, right? Cool. Catch up. When patience was being handed out, I was distracted. That's good. Most of us, I think, are probably in that same boat. Okay, so the way we're going to do this, relax using meditation, is with a method called single-pointed concentration, or not multitasking. That's a more simple way of thinking of it, right? So we're super familiar with multitasking, aren't we? We do it all day long. In fact, we do it so often that our mind like naturally seems to do that now. Right? It's so used to thinking about a million things, bouncing from ideas, being pulled in this direction or that seems like our baseline, right? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to make a choice. We are going to focus single-pointedly, exclusively on our breath. We're going to focus so exclusively on our breath that all the other thoughts start to fade away a little bit. It's very similar if you ever felt like in the zone, doing something at work or exercising, right? Let's do the work example. You're making a nice little chart in Excel, right? And you're totally plugged in, and then you lose track of time, and colleagues calling your name, don't hear it, right? Forgot to eat lunch, right? All the noises that normally distracting you, it's like they're gone, right? So this is a kind of good example of what happens when you're really single-pointedly focused on something. There's no room for the other things, right? So that's what we're going to start to train in doing intentionally, right? Because maybe we've been doing it unintentionally. So we're going to do that now. It'll be about 5 minutes, not very long. Right? Common misconception about meditation: you do not need to meditate for hours on end, or retreat to a cave somewhere. No, you just need whatever space you're in, and just a wee bit of time. Anything that's reasonable for you, whether it's 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, doesn't matter, as long as it's kind of consistent. All right, so we're going to do a breathing meditation now. I'm going to guide us through it instructionally. Pretty simple. You're just going to focus on breathing in and out, the sensations of breathing in and out. And then when you notice that your mind is like, hey, I'd like you to think about that upcoming project that's making you super nervous, right? Instead of being like, okay, now I'm thinking about that, we're going to be like, not right now. I'm thinking about my breath. I'll get to you later, right? We're saying not right now, and we're bringing our attention back to our breath. That's meditation. Sometimes we think meditation is never never having our mind drift or like just blocking things out. It's the process of choosing to focus on something, recognizing when your attention is no longer focused on that thing and being able to bring it back. That's training in meditation. All right. So let's do that now. Does that sound good? Sounds doable. Okay. Sit comfortably. That's step one. Are you comfortable? If not, make a change. We want to be relatively comfortable because if you are not comfortable, what are you going to be thinking about instead of your breath? How uncomfortable you are, of course. So try to be as comfortable as you possibly can be. Chair's fine. You're laying down. You're tired. That's cool too. We don't really want to fall asleep, but no, there's worse things. And if you're sitting on a cushion, some people like to do that. That's cool. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Wherever you are is fine. Right? And you can go ahead and close your eyes and just follow along with what I'm saying. We're going to do about a 5-minute breathing meditation together. Okay? All right. Whenever we start a meditation, the first thing we always do is check in with ourselves. How are you feeling right now? Are you happy? Are you sad? Neutral? Tired? Energetic? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. All that matters is you begin to notice, take an interest in what your mind is up to. This is called mindfulness, a very important technique to develop in terms of combating anxiety. We'll talk about that later. Mindfulness is an active awareness of your thoughts, moment to moment, for the purpose of being able to respond skillfully to those thoughts. So just check in, ask yourself how you're doing right now. And having done that, you can now turn your full attention to your breath, breathing in and out of your nose very gently and very naturally. You do not need to take big, deep breaths or forcefully exhale the air. Just breathe as you normally would, in and out, following each moment of each breath as the air enters your nose, sits, and exits. Being completely present with each breath. As you breathe in and out gently and naturally. At some point, maybe you notice your attention drifts. Maybe you're worrying about something that's coming up later after class or something that happened earlier in the day. Whenever you notice that your mind has drifted a bit, we're just going to say, not right now, and bring our attention gently back to breathing in and out. Bring your attention back to your breath. Back to enjoying each moment of each breath. Allow yourself to relax. Allow yourself to enjoy this experience. You have nothing else to do, nowhere else to be, only to focus on breathing in and out. Keep bringing your attention back to your breath whenever it drifts. This process of choosing to focus single-pointedly on your breath, noticing when your attention has drifted and being able to bring your focus back to breathing, that is meditation. You are meditating right now. You are training your mind. You're training your mind to focus, to concentrate, to be relaxed, to be peaceful, to be happy. How wonderful. What an excellent use of your time. So just continue to breathe gently in and out for a little while longer. And just enjoy sitting here. Enjoy this moment. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Welcome back. How you doing? How was that? All your problems gone? The goal is to relax a little bit, right? So even if there was only a slight moment where we're like, oh, I feel a little more relaxed, that's good, right? We can build upon that. And at first, it's going to probably be fleeting, right? And the reason that it's going to be fleeting isn't because you're like not a good meditator or whatever, right? You just don't do this that often. It's the same thing with anything that we learn, right? Watching the Olympics, right? These people, they train for a long time. Hurdling's very familiar to a hurdler. They hurdle all the time. If I were to go out there, don't think I'd do that well. Gail goes so fast. Yeah. So Gail, that's a really interesting insight to have, right? Because time is something that seems to speed up and slow down depending on how much we're focused on something, right? Same concept with being in the zone at work, right? Lose track of time. Right? Very cool. Tsushida, question. You said to allow your mind to focus and relax. How does one do both at the same time? So the interesting thing, this is a very interesting kind of, I guess, characteristic of the mind. Focus actually leads to relaxation, right? Which is what we're kind of training it. And I know we don't often associate being focused with being relaxed, because normally when we think of being focused, we're like, oh, I got to get this project done, right? We're like nervous about a lot of things. We're not very relaxed, right? But we can kind of see there's our examples, right? When we feel relaxed through focus. And by doing breathing meditation, this is essentially what we're doing. We are totally focused on our breath, completely focused on our breath, right? What happens? No room for anything else. All the other thoughts start to fade away. We relax a little bit. So the two are almost analogous. This is a pretty interesting concept. Lisa, can you talk about why you suggest we breathe in and out through our noses? Oh, this is great. Great question. I love this. Maybe I should like just build this into my introduction part, because this is very common. The long story short is it doesn't matter. You should do whatever's natural to you. That's my opinion. Traditionally, meditation is taught breathing in and out through your nose. But if that's not normal for you, right? If you're like, I breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth, then you should do that, in my opinion. Because what we're trying to do is limit the amount of distractions that we have. And guess what? Thinking, am I breathing right, is a distraction. So it doesn't really matter how you breathe. I teach it that way because that's how I do it. And that's kind of how it's traditionally taught. But you should feel empowered to breathe in and out however it comes normal to you. That, I think that would be the most beneficial. It's a really good question. Thank you. Maureen, if you get an itch while doing this, is it better to try to forget about it by focusing on breathing? Oh my God. Hey, you guys have good questions today. Maureen, great question. So we can kind of go in two directions with this, right? So if itching is like something that's like a huge distraction for you, well, we can try to kind of just accept that it's happening and move past it. It's a good practice in acceptance, or you can just scratch it and move on. Really, if you know that like itching, this is going to, if this is going to like nag you for your entire meditation, just scratch it. That's fine. It doesn't matter, right? We'll break our concentration for a little bit and then we'll get right back in. That's the practice, right? It's good to practice getting back in when we're distracted. That's our whole life, is we're distracted, right? Really good question. So we could investigate it and like try to just kind of accept it and let it pass. And I think you'll notice that if you're really super focused, you don't notice that you're itching, right? I actually that hits a little close to home, because I had like a phobia of itching, hated itching. Every time I'd itch, I'd get super anxious, right? And when I was really settled in, focused in a meditation, I never thought about it. Just never felt an itch, right? Cool. Is it possible to have a focused, relaxed mind, but your body has anxiety? Yeah. So sometimes we can be fidgety, right? Or like we feel like our body feels like kind of anxious, right? That's a really good question. So part of meditation is there's like a trickle down effect from mind to body, right? So at first, right, we might be kind of like bouncing back and forth between, we're kind of focused on breathing, right? But then we're worried about like that our body's feeling kind of anxious, right? But essentially what will happen over time when you train in meditation more is there'll be like a trickle down effect, like of your mind is relaxed and so everything else around you is relaxed, right? It all stems from mind. Good question. Toshida, isn't it because breathing in through the nose and out via mouth trigger fight or flight? Boy, I didn't know that, but that's a good reason. In terms of meditation, I would just do what's normal for you. Right? This is already new, right? A new endeavor for us. Let's not add anything new into the mix. That's just my opinion on it, right? Gail, I like that you encourage nice natural breathing. Yeah. So just why do I focus on this? Because we want this to be a part of your life, right? If you only feel relaxed when you go like, right? You're not gonna be doing that in a meeting. Right? So yeah, it's good to train with like normal breathing, I think, right? The idiot upstairs is determined to make his last stage as disturbing as possible. Dude, hey, look, life has lots of distractions and noises. So if we, like, this is a really interesting point about meditation, right? If we kind of only meditate when our conditions are perfect, we're going to have trouble meditating because our conditions are rarely perfect, right? So even when there are distractions, again, it's okay. Just bring our attention back as many times as we need to. Great. Cool. All right. Awesome. Okay. Let's move on to our topic for today, which is anxiety. And again, I usually teach this class in two or three. I don't even remember. But we're going to try to kind of do a condensed version, right? So there's going to be three concepts that we were talking about with regards to our mind, anxiety, and how meditation can help with that, right? And the first, and I hinted to it a little bit during our meditation, is what I will call recognition or recognize, whatever you want to call it. That recognize, right? And this is really our first step in kind of combating our anxiety, right? And this has a lot to do with mindfulness, which we'll talk about a little bit, right? But essentially, we want to, in order to take action on our anxious thoughts, we have to recognize that they're happening. And you might be like, I am very aware of my anxiety. That's the problem. Well, we become like aware of it a little too late in the process, right? So a good way of thinking about anxiety and really any kind of negative emotion, right, is think about like a little flame, like a fire, right? Now, fires start as one little flame, right? And if you happen to be standing over this area, this little flame pops up, and you had, I don't know why you're holding a fire extinguisher, but you have one ready to go, boom, you put it out, and that's it, right? No big deal. But if you are not aware that there is this flame, what happens? It's my fire sound. Spreads, right? Fire spreads. I guess you could do the same thing with water, like a drip. If you catch it, all right, that's good. If you leave it for, I don't know, a long time, now it's spreading to the carpet in the different rooms, right? So this is a good analogy for really anxiety or any sort of like negative emotion, right? Anxiety starts with one thought, right? Kind of a worry about the future, so future outcome, right? And then what happens? We ruminate on that thought and it spreads. Right. And before we know it, we're like completely engulfed in anxiety. Right. And same true for anger. Right. Somebody says something we don't like. Right. This single thing. And now we start to ruminate. Oh, they're such a bad person. I hate them. I don't want to be around them. Right. It starts to spread. So the goal of this step in terms of helping with anxiety is to start to build up your ability to recognize anxiety earlier on in the process, right? We can use an example like social anxiety is pretty common, right? So we got to go to a social event or meeting somebody new or a new boss or something, and we get this thought: what if I say something stupid? All right, so we're a little spark of a little flame of anxiety there. Now, if we let that fester, it starts to spread, right? And then we start to be like, man, I always say something stupid when there's new people around. Why do I always do that, right? Then we start to be like, there's something wrong with me. And then we're like, I can't go. I'm too stressed out, right? It starts to spread, right? So it's really important to train in recognition. That's my spiel. Gail, does anxiety feed rumination, or do they feed off each other? Ooh, good question. So think of anxiety as the flame. Rumination is like if you were to like, how do you make a flame bigger? But put gasoline on it. So rumination like puts gasoline on the flame, right? So and I'm glad you brought that up, because the rumination phase is actually where I recommend trying to detect that you're doing it, right? So like if you find, hey, I'm like really going around circles about this, like, okay, I'm ruminating about this. Let me try to do something about it, right? Before it becomes this like unmanageable thing, right? Cool. Great question. Amazing questions, as always. Okay, so recognition is all about mindfulness. If you are, have heard the word mindfulness before, it's all about monitoring your mind, how you're feeling, why, so you can respond skillfully to those thoughts, those feelings, right? Early detection, right? Mindfulness, like, if a tornado is coming, what happens? Siren goes off, woo, 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 right? Now the siren doesn't stop the tornado, right? But it does say, hey, something's happening here. You might want to do something about it. Seek shelter or whatever. So mindfulness is sort of like a tornado alarm for our mind, for our mood. And if we kind of get a little hint, hey, I'm starting to feel a little anxious here, might want to do something about it before, boom, it explodes, right? Cool. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we train in recognition, this first kind of step? I think the best entry point in training in mindfulness, and particularly recognizing anxiety, is to set an alarm on your phone, and when that thing goes off, you just check in with yourself. That's it, right? Because the reason is we're not used to doing this. We're not used to taking an interest in our thoughts. In fact, oftentimes we don't want to take an interest in our thoughts at all. We don't want to think about it. So we have to start to tilt the scales in the other direction and start to become familiar with, to normalize this concept of checking in with ourselves and just taking note of how we're feeling. It's the first step to being able to resolve any problems that we have, right? So an alarm on your phone is good, or a Post-it note on your computer monitor if you do a lot of work or something like that. Just to check in. You don't even have to do anything about it, right? Just ask yourself, how am I doing? Be honest with yourself, right? It's a really good and easy way to start to build up your mindfulness kind of repertoire technique or something like that, right? Okay. So we recognize that we're getting anxious. Great. That's awesome, right? Janelle, I did that 3 a day. Sometimes I don't remember what the chime is for. Hey, what's that alarm going on there? I'll just snooze it. That's great, right? So 3 times a day is awesome. If you only want to do once, that's cool too, right? Whatever is manageable for you is important. Important to be honest about that with yourself. So we recognize our anxiety early. Good. Now what? What do? We want to try to reduce the power that this feeling has over us, right? And this kind of teaching on reducing anxiety, I split into 2 concepts, right? The first is a word nobody likes. It's called acceptance. We don't like that word, right? We don't want to accept it, right? But this is a really important step. And anxiety is actually like anger. I always like to mention this because I never really thought of it that way until I started learning about some of the stuff. But anger, I like to define as when things should be different than they are, right? That's anxiety. Why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be, nervous about this, right? I shouldn't be, worried about this project or whatever, right? It really is rooted in a lack of acceptance of what is happening in this moment, right? Now, this isn't like this isn't like inaction, right? We're not saying I guess you should just you should just not take action on anything. No, you should take action, right? But we can be okay that this is happening right now. Essentially, we want to start to not wish away our anxiety, right? We don't want to get to the point where we're I just wish this would go away. I kind of feel helpless to it. I just wish this would go away, right? Let me catch up. I have alarms to take my meds, take them. I stop, take several deep breaths. But hey, that's a great idea, right? That's awesome. So you're combining that. And Ivy, that's actually a really good combination of what we talked about, I think it was last class, is you're taking an activity that you're already doing, taking medication, right? And then you're using this as okay, I'm going to take a couple breaths, right? So you're building in meditation into routines you're already doing. Fantastic. Very creative and smart and good. Okay. So, acceptance is acceptance is when we do not try to wish away our current condition, right? It doesn't mean we have to be happy with it, but we're accepting that that's how it is right now in our mind, right? This is very difficult, obviously, because anxiety sucks and nobody likes it and it feels awful. So it's very natural to kind of want to wish this away. But what we're doing when we do that is we are making a mental connection, right? That this feeling is bad, right? And what happens when we do something repeatedly? It comes more naturally to us, familiarization. So this thing equals bad. We repeat it. This thing equals bad. This thing equals bad. This thing equals bad. Before we know it, it's our mind, as soon as it even just thinks about that thing that makes us anxious, boom, we're anxious, right? So the acceptance is trying to sever this a little bit, right? It's starting to remove this label that we put on anxiety, our anxiety, right? So we recognize, and then it's called patient acceptance, but I'm just called it acceptance, right? We're kind of accepting the situation with as little judgment as possible. We're trying to be patient with ourselves, right? How do we do this? How do we go about doing this, right? So what I would recommend here is saying this out loud. Okay. So we start to have like an anxious thought, right? And we can say, I'm having some anxious thoughts, and that's okay. Even if you don't believe it, right? We're just kind of putting it out there, right? It's a verbal acceptance of what is happening in this moment. The present moment, right? I'm anxious. That's okay. All right? Now, if we want to take it a step further, which I think is even a healthier way of approaching this concept, is instead of saying I'm, feeling anxious and that's okay, my mind is experiencing anxious thoughts and that's okay, right? Subtle difference, but we're removing the I from this, which is a huge part of dealing with anxiety, because over the years of being anxious and it's like repetition, the cycle of being anxious, we start to identify as being an anxious person, right? We are not an anxious person. Just like if we, get angry, we're not necessarily an angry person. We're just become very familiar with being anxious or being angry. And we can start to tilt the scales in the other direction, right? So my mind is experiencing anxious thoughts, and that's okay. That's a really kind of low-key way of practicing acceptance, right? Maybe you're like, that seems dumb. I thought that too, but it actually is quite helpful. And it's a really good first step for what we're going to do next, which is creating space, right? So this is the third thing we're going to talk about. So we recognize. Does anybody have any questions? I know I'm flying through this, but I feel like it's cool to get it all in one thing. So we recognize that we're getting anxious, right? We accept my mind. Hey, you know what? My mind's feeling a little anxious. Okay, that's happening now. Good. That is a form of acceptance. Great. Now we want to kind of counterattack by creating space, right? And now when I'm talking about space, I'm talking about mental space. But the concept of mental space is kind of nebulous. So we can think about physical space as a good kind of reference to how this might work, right? So I feel like I always use the same examples, but I don't know. It's just what really sticks with me. My wife and I vacationed in Montana a lot. They call Montana big sky country. You know why? The sky looks huge. You can see for miles. It's crazy. You can see so far in Montana, right? And so one time we were there and we were kind of just hanging out in this little field with some camping chairs. And we were looking off into the mountains in the distance, way, way, way off in the distance, right? It's a beautiful day over our heads, but way off in the distance over the mountains, storm clouds, right? And lightning. We're seeing lightning over the mountains, like miles and miles and miles away. Blue skies above us, but over there, not so much. And what is our reaction to this? My wife and I were like, man, it's so cool of you to see that lightning. I was like, oh, I just saw another one. I think that one hit the mountain. It was like we're so fascinated and interested by this thing that's actually kind of scary. Right? A bolt of electricity is shooting down from the sky and zapping things, right? But, right, we're looking at it with interest, right? Because there's a lot of space between us and that. Now, over time, what happens? The clouds start to come closer to me, and eventually we're like, I think we got to get out of here. I don't feel safe, right? So that interest turns into fear, depending on how close or far the thing is, right? Ivy, Wyoming is like that too. Yes, it is. Exactly the same. Yep. So this is a really good analogy to mental space, because mental space works the exact same way. The further off something is, the more manageable it might seem, right? Let's say you have a project due, right? But it's 3 months away. You're like, oh man, I'm not really looking forward to this project, but I got some time, You're not that stressed about it. Uh-oh, it's the week of, now we're super stressed at it, right? Space, mental space in that case. That's time. time is a space indicator too. But a good example of mental space that I often reference is if you think about how you kind of tend to give really good advice to your friends, but giving advice to yourselves, not as easy. At least I noticed that, right? And really the reason is space, right? When your friend is having a problem, where is the storm cloud? It's over their head, right? You're looking at it from a bit of a distance. And the result is that you're looking at it with kind of interest, objectivity, right? Oh, yeah, I think you should do this. It's very clear. I don't know. Now, the storm cloud's over our head. Not the same, right? We are very panicked about it, right? There's the rumination for the anxiety, right? So mental space is huge in terms of being able to lessen the power of our anxiety and also setting ourselves up to even kind of investigate our own anxiety with a level of fascination to gain some insight into why that we're feeling this way, right? But for now, we're just worrying about trying to kind of lessen the power of it, right? So how do we do this? How do we create mental space? Right? I got good news for you. You already did it. So breathing meditation, great way of creating mental space. In fact, that's kind of what we're doing, right? So we're choosing to focus on our breath, right? We're noticing when our attention drifts to the thing we're anxious about, bringing our attention back. And what happens if we're able to kind of focus on our breath? There becomes some space between us and our worries, right? Like the example we were using about if you're in the zone at work, things start to fade into the background a little bit, right? So we're creating mental space every time we do breathing meditation, which is why meditation is so great for helping with anxiety, because this kind of concept of mental space is kind of built into meditation. So breathing meditation is a great way of training in how to create mental space for yourself, right? Well, we're not always going to be able to just plop down and meditate at a moment's notice. So another bit of advice that I generally like to give is we imagine we're doing like a perspective shift. It's like a little thought experiment, one of those. And we're going to use this kind of concept of friend and us, right? We were talking about we give better advice than we give to our friends than we give ourselves. So if you're like anxious about an event coming up, right? We can think, okay, I'm anxious about this. That's okay, except what if my best friend was in this exact same situation? Same event, same everything. They're feeling the same way, right? They're feeling really nervous. Like, what would I say to them? What would my advice be? Would it be like, hey, you always say dumb things. You're probably going to say something dumb. No, you never say that, right? There's a ton of compassion, right? I would say things like, hey, you know what? Like, I get nervous too at events, but you know what? I think once you get there, you're going to start to settle in and feel a little like a nice, compassionate, reasonable, healthy response, right? And then why don't we take that advice for ourselves? Right? So this is another method. If we don't want to do the meditation on it, we can create some mental space by imagining that there's more space between us and the problem, by imagining our friend having this issue, then giving them advice and then taking that advice for ourselves, right? It's a very good method. I use it a lot personally. And I think it's really good with anxiety, particularly. So go forth and do that. Okay. So those to recap, 3 things we're going to do to help with our anxiety, right? We're going to start to learn how to recognize that we're getting anxious earlier on in the process, like that fire example, right? The way that we're going to do that, try setting an alarm or something to check in with yourself. Normalize checking in with yourself, right? Boom. There's the first thing. 2, patient acceptance, right? Accepting what's happening, right? How do we do this? We're going to kind of change the way that we talk about ourselves and what we're going through. So if we notice, we recognize that we're feeling anxious, we're just going to say, my mind is experiencing some anxious thoughts. Okay, that's happening now. All right? There, acceptance. Great. All right? And then after that, we're going to try to create some space, right, between us and the thing that's making us anxious, right? And, maybe physical space can help too, right? Walking away from a situation or something like that. But we're really talking about mental space. And so there are two methods that you can use to do that. Either doing a short breathing meditation, even it's 30 seconds or whatever, just to kind of create a little bit of mental space there, or do this thought activity about placing your best friend in this scenario, thinking about what your advice would be them. It's a creative way of illustrating the impact of space on our problems, right? Is that cool? Does that seem doable? It'll take practice like anything else, but I think it's pretty doable. Cool. Okay. Well, that did go a little longer than I anticipated, so I'm going to shorten my second meditation here. No surprise there. So I want to do another meditation here, be pretty similar to the one before, but just, a little different kind of spice on it, throw a little spice on it. Gail, powerful session. Nice. I'm glad you enjoy it. Yeah. So, and it's kind of interesting that some people don't think that they have anxiety, but everybody has anxiety to a certain degree, right? We all are worried about something, right? Anxious, worried about a future outcome at some point. Yeah, it affects people differently, right? But everybody can kind of benefit by practicing this, even if you're somebody that doesn't identify as being an anxious person, right? Fortunately for me, I identify as being an anxious person, so jump right in. Okay, so sit comfortably once again. Susan, you're very smart. I don't know about that. This is just, honestly, this is just kind of thinking logically about how our mind works, right? And part of the cool, at least in my opinion, the cool thing about meditation is, well, we're never really taught to kind of think about how our own mind works, right? But when we do, some of this starts to make a little bit of sense to us, right? So I love the logic aspect of meditation, I guess is what I'm getting at. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. Okay, so sit comfortably, nice and relaxed. You can go ahead and close your eyes. We're just going to do a short meditation. We'll start by doing some breathing and then just a very short contemplation to just kind of let sink in some of the things that we talked about. Okay? All right. Let's once again check in with ourselves. How are you feeling now? Different than before? The same? Whatever it is, just noticing. Now we know why we're doing this. We are practicing mindfulness. We are cultivating our ability to recognize our anxious thoughts early on in the process. Why? To be able to deal with them more skillfully. So just check in with yourself. Ask yourself, how are you doing in this moment? And then once again, turn your attention to your breathing, in and out, whatever way feels natural to you. Breathing gently, normally, no deep breaths or forcefully exhaling the air. Just breathe normally, in and out. Following each moment of each breath as it enters your nose and exits. And every once in a while, we can practice mindfulness. We can practice recognition by checking in and seeing, am I still exclusively focused on my breath? If not, just gently guide your attention back to breathing in and out. Enjoying each breath, allowing yourself to relax. One of the benefits of single-pointed concentration training in this is it reveals some kind of hidden aspects of the activity we're engaging in. So maybe you're starting to notice, as you're settling into your breath, some things about your breath that you hadn't really thought much about previously. Maybe you're noticing some sensations, how the air feels cool temperature-wise each time you breathe in. And that same air, it feels warm each time you breathe out. How interesting. Or maybe you're noticing some of the subtle movements of your body with each breath. Your shoulders gently rising, falling. Chest gently expanding, contracting. Every part of you being a participant in your breath. You are starting to find subtle joys in something as simple as breathing. How wonderful. How amazing that you can learn to enjoy, appreciate something as simple and common as breathing in and out, gently and naturally. It's kind of amazing that you're able to do this, right? Even if you're only able to relax a little bit just by breathing. What does that mean, right? Can we look a little deeper? That means that peacefulness, relaxation, happiness, that's inside of you. It's there. It's always there. Waiting for you to tap into it. Meditation isn't creating peacefulness. It's training you to tap into what's already there. Knowing this, believing this, is crucial. Something we can always fall back on. It helps with our acceptance when we're feeling anxious or things aren't going our way. We can know that even though we're feeling anxious, these are momentary passing clouds. But our mind is naturally peaceful. It's there, and you can access it. So just take some time now and just think about what that would mean for you if you were able to access this peacefulness you have inside of you more easily. How would that impact your life? And let those thoughts motivate you to practice meditating, to practice using the techniques we talked about today to help with anxious thoughts. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. How'd it go? So it was kind of similar, right? Started off the same, right? We started to see, okay, well, this is why I'm checking in now. Now I know I'm practicing being able to recognize what my mind's up to, right? And that's, when I'm noticing that my attention has drifted during breathing meditation, I'm actually practicing mindfulness. Cool, right? And then we start to see some interesting things that come out of focusing single pointedly on something, right? Which is kind of fun. And then we kind of went into this idea, this thought, this I call it like a contemplation, I guess. We are starting to dig deeper into what it means that we're able to relax a little bit by breathing, right? And what it means is that that's in you, right? That's you. Relax, calm, cool. You just have to learn how to access it. You become more familiar with accessing it. That way you can do so easier. That's how familiarity works. Great. Let me catch up. Gail, thank you. Oh, Gail's literally falling asleep. Good night. Get some good reps, Gail. Thanks for coming. Always great having you here. Susan, I find that I have to yawn a lot. So that's not uncommon. Essentially, when we're doing this, we're kind of like giving ourselves permission to relax. That's why I usually say that. And part of that is like, we're exhausted from just all the busyness that's going on in our mind all day long. So when we do this, when we kind of single-pointedly focus on our breath, sometimes we just like really get kind of tired with it, right? That's totally fine, right? If you find that it's happening all the time, like you're falling asleep a lot or feel like you're going to fall asleep a lot, then something I suggest is think about different times a day to try meditating when you're a little less drained, right? Cool. Maureen, as I'm doing this, my head keeps dropping. Is that good, or do I need to be conscious of it? Ooh. So, do not be conscious of it. So what's happening is like, you're oh my God, I always punch my microphone. Like, you're just kind of relaxing into your chair a little bit, right? And your head's going to drop, and that's totally fine. Just go with it. Just go with it. All right. I think that's great. Great question. Pierre, my dog is very good at this. I'm jealous. I don't know. I think dogs are more scatterbrained than us sometimes, but actually, it's interesting. We can use dog as an example, right? Okay. If you throw a ball to a dog, right? What happens? Nothing else exists in the world except the ball. You're gone. Everything's gone. Nothing matters except this ball, right? Single-pointedly focused on the ball. And what happens? Like having a great time, right? Single-pointedly focused on the ball, right? We can use kind of thinking about it. It's a good example of how we can kind of think about some real life things and how meditation might apply to them, right? To show us some of the stuff we're learning here out there, right? Cool. Okay, that's all for today. Janelle's dog is deaf and sleeps for 22 hours a day. Well, it's a tough life being deaf. The sleeping part sounds nice at times. Okay, so thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I love teaching and could not do this without you. So thank you for taking time out of your day. I know everyone's very busy and appreciate you being here. Either whether this is your first time or fifth or 10th or whatever, I really appreciate it. If you had a good time, great, come back. We do something new each week, each Wednesday, same time. And if you're super into this, you're like, hey, meditation's cool. I'd like to explore this further. I do one-on-one classes, which are really good for being able to focus on something that's particularly important to you. So I don't know, maybe you don't have anxiety is not something that you want to work on, right? Well, then we can work on something that's particular to you, right? So if that is interesting to you, a one-on-one class or bringing me in for work, that happens a lot. You'll be like, oh, I got a good meditation guy for work. It'll be cool. And the benefit, it's a double benefit for you because then you get time off for working. And you can just sit there and meditate instead of working. That's great. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Email me if any of this sounds interesting. You want to set something up, we'll find a time. All right. Keith at meditationbreaks.com. And I typed it incorrectly. Meditationbreaks.com. Good. There we go. Cool. I gotcha. Blah, blah, blah. You also say not to take a deep breath. Is there a reason for that? Yeah, from yoga. Yeah, so yoga, it's very common to do this deep breath thing, right? Now, that can kind of, there's like almost like a visualization there. Like we're imagining just like kind of like getting rid of all this stuff, like get rid of it, right? That can be really cool. And if that relaxes you, that's great. I encourage you to do that. But when we're training in meditation, I think it's really important to make meditation normal for us, right? So if we can only relax by doing deep breaths, well, I don't know if you're like walking down the street or you're in a meeting or something like that. Well, people are going to be like, I don't know, why are you breathing like that? So we start to become almost like attached to like, oh, I need to do deep breathing in order to relax, right? But really we don't. It might help us sometimes, right? But that breathing that way doesn't equal relaxation. You can relax by breathing any way you want. And so I encourage people to try doing normal breaths. That way, when you're doing normal breaths all throughout the day, this might seem more natural, right? Does that make sense? I think so. Hopefully. All right. Good question. Great questions. You guys are amazing. I love you guys. Thank you. Great class. And I will see you next week. Okay. Take care.